G'day guys, my name's Sean Dove, a creative from Melbourne, Australia, and I think I've found my new obsession. I've only just discovered you can use soft bodies on splines, which results in some really fun and dynamic animations. I shared a few results on Instagram with what I'd been playing with, and I thought it might be worthwhile to discuss my approach to create this fun logo reveal where the splines wrap up to reveal a silhouette of our shape or logo. Alright, let's jump straight in. Alright guys, so this is essentially what we're going to be trying to create today. We've got all these dynamic splines and they come flying in and end up revealing the logo shape that we're aiming for. So in this case, I grabbed the Nike logo to have a bit of a play with. Now for this, I did a 9x16 crop. So everything that we're sort of seeing on the outside here, that wouldn't actually be in view. If I up the opacity of our safe frames, you can kind of see what that final crop was that I was going for. So you can see everything starts outside that, grows in, and ends up wrapping around our logo. So this is what we want to try and create. So I'm going to open up a new file and we're going to attempt to recreate this from scratch. Now I did that with a series of circle splines. So let's do it exactly the same. Let's grab a circle and I'm going to leave our radius at 200 and having the intermediate points at uniform with just 8. That's going to allow it to run reasonably quick. So on our circle spline, let's go up to tags, dynamic tags, and we'll add a soft body tag. So in our soft body tag, let's come over to the collision tab and I'm going to enable use. And we want to set a margin here. This is going to be the thickness essentially of our finished spline. So let's give that a 10 centimeter radius. So to demonstrate what this is doing, let's go up to our primitives and I'm going to throw in a torus. I'm going to rotate that exactly 90 degrees and lift it up 200 centimeters. This is going to position it right at the top of our spline. Now our pipe radius, I'm going to set that to 10. And our ring radius, let's pull that down as well. Something about 25, that should work perfect. I'm going to duplicate our torus, make a second copy, and I'll pull that down 400 centimeters. And now we've got one exactly top and bottom of our spline. On both our toruses, let's go up to tags, simulation tags, and we want to add a collision body. I'm just going to hit play and you can see exactly what we've got here. We've got a nice dynamic spline that's getting caught by both those toruses. Now, I don't want to add any additional points to our circle, but you can see it's a little bit chunky. So ideally, we want to try and smooth this out. So with our circle selected, let's go up to MoGraph and feed in a tracer, and that'll create that trace link for us. And I want to connect all elements. I'm going to hide our circle, and you can see our tracer is actually disconnected. We can just enable close spline, and that will give us that perfect circle again. Our type, I'm going to make it a B-spline, and our intermediate points, I'll make that natural. Now we've got our circle hidden, but we've still got that nice dynamic spline thanks to the tracer referencing our original circle. But it's now much smoother as well, which is just perfect. Now a tracer, let's drop that into a sweep. I'll grab an end side. I'll feed that above our tracer in our sweep. So we'll pull our radius down to 10, which is the exact same size of our collision margin. And we'll up our side, something about 20 to get this nice and smooth. Great, now that's getting caught by those toruses exactly how we'd expect. Now in our soft body tag on our spline, this is where we can really dial in the look that we're after. For example, if we pull our shear and flexion as well as the dampening down to 2, you'll see that a lot of the energy gets drained, but we're also getting, our points are also a lot freer to move. Now the inverse of that, if I bump them all up to 90, you're going to see it's far stiffer. Now I'm going to leave it at default, but I do encourage you to go have a good play with these settings. All right, let's rewind this. You might find you need to just frame forward and frame back just to get it to reset to its initial position. I'm going to delete our toruses for now. That was purely just to demonstrate what our spline's doing. And I'm going to hit Command D. I'm going to hit Command D to bring up our project settings. Let's go over to Dynamics and I'm going to kill any gravity. And I'm just going to up our step per frame in the Expert tab to 10. This is just going to allow it to calculate a bit better. Now with both our sweep and our circle selected, I'm going to hit Alt G and throw this into a group. This is sort of the basis of our set finish shape that we're going to be playing with. And we can call this our dynamic string. We've got no gravity now, which is exactly what we're after. So what I want to do, I want to create a duplicate of our setup here. So I'm going to copy that out and just move it away from our original one a bit. And this can become our string 2. And if I curl this down, this is now housed that exact same setup that we had in our initial one. And if I hit play, we've got no gravity, there's nothing interacting with it, they'll stay perfectly still. Great. Now what we can do to create some really interesting movement is come up to simulate, dynamics, and add a force. I'm going to increase our force a little bit here. Let's try 20 to start with. And I'll hit play, and you can see what that's done. It's now made our dynamics, they're essentially attracted to each other. I'll increase our strength a little bit more to about 50. And you can see now, as I increase this, they're more and more likely to want to be with each other, essentially. I'll add a few extra frames here as well, just so we can let this play a bit longer. All right, I'm going to really push our strength. Let's double it. Let's go to 100. I'm going to rewind back to 0. And now with this increased strength, let's hit play again. And let's take a look at what we're now getting. They snap together far quicker. And you can see now we're getting this really fun wrap. They're really attracted to each other. Let's double our strength again. And what I might even do is grab our second setup here, and I'm just going to rotate that 90 degrees. I'll just pull it back a little bit so we're not intersecting at the start. And now we're getting some fun wraps. This is essentially what I was trying to demonstrate there, that we can essentially get our dynamic strings to want to ball up. And this in itself is good fun. And we could keep layering up these little setups, and the bigger that ball would end up becoming. Okay, great. We've essentially got this set up. We've got our dynamic spline. They're getting attracted to each other. So this is working really nicely. I'm just going to jump back into my original project and just grab that Nike spline that I've already got set for us, and we'll just bring that over. Just hitting Control V to paste that into our scene, and I'll just zero out its position on Z, so we're right in the center there. I'll drop a camera and look through it, and I'll just zero out all of our rotation on our camera. I'm going to grab our Nike spline, hitting S to frame it up, then we can just pull back a little bit so that's in the center of our view there. So what we're wanting to do is the shape of our logo. We don't want our splines inside that. What we're trying to do is create a negative space for everything to be wrapped around. And you know what? I'm actually going to hide our Nike spline for a second and show you that we can do this with any shape. So I think let's start with just a simple circle. I'm going to grab another circle spline, and I'll feed that straight into an extrude. Jumping out of our camera, we want a little bit more depth on our extrude here. So I'll jump that up to 300. And at the same time, let's add a few more subdivisions. This will allow the dynamics to calculate better. Let's come up to tags, simulation tags, and add a collider body onto our extrude. All right, let's re-enable our dynamic string setup. And I just want to move this away from our extrude essentially. And I just want to move this away from our extrude. So moving it on X, let's just pull it out. About 600 should be good to demonstrate this. And I'm going to grab our circle spline that's in our extrude. And we know that we offset it 300. So our circle spline, let's just move that forward. No, sorry, let's reverse that. Let's go minus 150 in Z. And now when I jump into our 4 views, you can see that extrude is perfectly centered. Nice. Now if I hit play, nothing's going to happen. We've only got the one dynamic string, so the force won't take any effect. So now what we want is for our dynamic string to be attracted to our shape. So let's come up to simulate, forces, and I'm going to throw in an attractor. Now by default, this is going to land right in the center, and in our case, that's perfect. Let's increase the strength of our attractor. Let's go 200 to start with. I'm going to look through our camera, zoom back a little bit. and I'll hit play. And now you can see our dynamic string, although slowly, is getting pulled towards our shape. And because of that collider body on the extrude, it's not able to pass through, and it ends up wrapping around. Let's bump our attractor strength. Let's go 2000. Just by doing that, our dynamic string really wants to try and get to the center of our object. And if I hide it for a second, you can see it wraps around far quicker. It really gets pulled forward to the center of our extrude shape. But you can see an issue we're now facing is our dynamic string starts to pass in front of our extruded shape. And when we're trying to create this negative fill, that's exactly what we don't want. So there's a couple of things we could do. We could try and trap our shape so it doesn't pass forward. But a real simple option is essentially just to create a bigger extrude. So what I'll do to begin with is zero out our position of our circle. We'll get that back in the center. And our offset of the extrude, let's make it 2000. Give us plenty of shape to play with. Reselecting our circle spline, we know we need to move that minus 1000 on Z, and that will recenter our extruded shape. I'm also going to add some more subdivisions here. Look back through our camera. I'm going to hide our extruded shape for a second, but also just jump into our dynamics tag so I can kill any bounce and just double our friction. So now when I hit play, our circle spline gets pulled towards that attractor, which is in the center of our extruded shape. And now it wraps really nicely just around that circle extrude. And because we've given ourselves more depth, nothing's passing in front or behind, which is exactly what we're after. Great, this is working really nicely. I'm going to re-enable our extrude and just delete our circle. I'm going to feed in our Nike spline. Now to get this extruded shape back in the center, we can see our Nike splines perfectly in the center. So we just need to push it forward 1000 on Z, and this will recenter our extruded shape. Great, that's looking good. I'm going to look through our camera again. Let's hide that extrude. And then we'll hit play. And just like we saw with the circle spline, our dynamic string wants to get pulled towards that attractor, which is right in the middle of our extrude. Now we're just using the default camera at the moment, but let's jump in and we'll change our focal length to 200. This is going to start to flatten out everything we're seeing. We can zoom out a little bit so you can see exactly what I mean. Our extruded Nike logo no longer looks too distorted. We're starting to see just that flat shape again, which is what we want. Let's start to duplicate our dynamic string setup. Let's create 3 of them, and I'll hit play again. And now they start to get pulled towards that attractor in the middle of our shape. They're also still balling up, and okay, now because we've created more of our dynamic strings, our force is having effect again. So I'm just going to disable that for a second. So our splines don't want to get pulled together, and now they're just focused on trying to get themselves to that attractor so we can start to create that shape of the Nike logo. Nice, this is working well. I'm going to grab our 3 dynamic string setups and just pull it away from our logo a little bit. I'm going to duplicate this a few times and just start to position them around our logo. You can see I'm trying to make them far enough away so when we look back through our camera, they're not going to be in view before we start our little simulation. Now if I kill our attractor and enable our force, you can see all our little splines want to try and cluster together. Now to make this even more random, we can just start to rotate some of our string setups. So I'm just going to work my way through here and just start to rotate them so they're in slightly different positions. This will make it feel not so uniform, and we're going to create some really interesting shapes. Nice, so something like that should work nicely for us. Hitting play again, and there you can see what we're getting. All of our little setups start to create those balls that we saw at the beginning. Now if I click this third icon along here and curl down our tags, we can double click on the dynamic tag count, and this is going to select all of our dynamics tags. I'm just going to deselect the one on our extrude, hit Shift C to type in selection, grab ourselves a selection object, and this is now storing all of our soft body tags. The reason for doing this is we can really quickly reselect all of our soft body tags without needing to do those steps again. And the reason I want to now select all of our soft body tags is I want them to maintain this position that we've set once we've added that force and they're all starting to cluster up. So let's go to the dynamics tag and set initial state. Let's rewind back to 0, and you're going to see they've maintained those little ball shapes that we've created. I'm going to look through our camera again and enable our attractor. Let's hit play. It's going to take a few frames, but slowly we're going to start to see all of our dynamic strings start to be forced towards that attractor again. Great, this is working well so far. Let's jump out of our camera, and I want these splines to get a bit bigger over time. You know, the bigger they get, the more space they're going to take up around our logo. So let's jump into our selection object and restore our selection of all our dynamic tags. Then let's come over to the soft body tag, and we're going to animate our rest length. At frame 0, let's add a keyframe at 100%. And we'll come forward about 1 second in our timeline, and we'll change that to 150, adding another keyframe. And I'm also just going to double our attractor strength, and this should make it happen a little bit quicker. So they're now going to grow 50% bigger and start to be pulled towards our attractor around our logo. I'm going to hit pause for a second, look back through our camera and hide our extruded shape, and you can start to see that we're getting a pretty good wrap around that logo. Now it's certainly not perfect at the moment. So what we can do is we can throw more attractors within our logo. So I'm going to grab our one that we've already set and pull it closer towards the tail, and just duplicate this through the middle of our shape to give our splines essentially more points that they're going to be attracted to. So in total, I've created 6 attractors and aim to evenly position them through our shape. With them all selected, let's drop our strength back to 2000. We've got a lot more now, so they're going to be far more inclined to be attracted towards our logo. I'll hit play again, and you can see this all happens a lot quicker now. All of our dynamic splines, all of our dynamic string splines get pulled towards all of those attractors. And now when I hide our logo, you can see we're getting a much cleaner wrap around that shape. It becomes much more distinct, exactly what we're trying to create. Nice, this is working really nicely, just with having those 6 attractors, really trying to pull together, really attracting all of our dynamic strings. And because we gave ourselves a nice deep extrude, nothing's trying to pass in front or behind, and that's working really nicely. And of course, we can just keep duplicating our setups to add even more strings, which will just create a more dense wrap around our shape. So I'm going to create 3 more over here, just checking to make sure that they're not getting clipped by our camera before we start. Great, that's working nicely. Let's pull them down underneath our attractors, just to keep it a bit neater. Looking back through our camera, and let's hit play again. They all get pulled in and start wrapping around our shape. Looks like we might be getting one just sort of clipping on the left-hand side there. Now, there's a couple of things we can try and do to fix that. It's just breaking through our shape a little bit. So again, hitting the second icon in from the right at the top here. Let's go into objects, and I'm going to grab all of our circle splines. And let's up our number count to something like 12. Let's just give it a few more points and see if that does anything for us. So we're still getting that little bit of intersection, and this could be almost a result of that initial force at the beginning that we gave it. So they're getting a little bit too tangled, which isn't allowing it to wrap properly. I'm going to delete those 6 additional splines we added. And you can see we can do some fun things. Like once it's already here, we can click that force back on. They're going to try and wrap, and then we can kill it. All sorts of crazy things. Like once they're wrapped, we can kill our attractors, and look at that. They're all going to want to push apart again and do their own thing. Something like that's a bit of fun. So you've got plenty of options for how to make something pretty unique and let these attractors and forces have a lot of control. So let's try something. I'm going to add a force at the beginning on frame 20 at 200%, add a keyframe. Come back to frame 0, let's zero it out. And at frame 30, I'm also going to zero it out. So we just get that little beat at the beginning that wants them to attract. I also think it could be fun to animate our attractors. Let's come forward to about frame 150. This is when they're going to have that nice wrap around our logo. So we'll add a keyframe at 2000, at a value of 2000. And we'll just come 2 frames forward and zero that out. So now as we play this back, you can see they all get forced together and then start to wrap nicely around our logo. Even now we're getting a little bit of breakthrough on the sort of top left of our logo, and adding some more subdivisions to that extrude, that's something that could potentially help it. But I'm starting to feel that it's that initial force that's causing us the issues. And our tractors didn't actually push apart then. Looks like I might have set our keyframes wrong. So I'm just going to zero them all out at 152. And then at frame 150, let's keyframe their strength at 2000. I'm going to disable the force. Let's rewind it back to 0, hitting play again. Nice, they all get pulled into those attractors. And now we're getting a much cleaner wrap on our logo. So I think that maybe that force was just doing something a little bit funky that didn't quite work for us. And then at frame 152, with those attractors pulled down to 0, they all push apart again, and that's actually good fun. Let's reduce our timeline to about 200 frames. Our dynamic strings get pulled in, create a really nice tight wrap in our logo. And then boom, they all separate. That's a bit of fun. That's working really quite nicely. Just going to bake this out for a second so we can sort of scrub through and see what we're looking at. Just jumping into our selection tab, I just restored the selection of all our soft body dynamics, came over to the cache tab and just baked down our object. And now I can scrub through and get a good idea of exactly the animation that we've been able to create. And again, thanks to having multiple attractors sort of scattered through our extruded shape, we're really able to create multiple points that our dynamic strings want to be pulled towards. I think this has come together really quite nicely, and you can see that essentially any really closed shape, you're going to be able to create this really nice wrap on, and they're all piling up really quite nicely. And if I jump back into my previous project, you can see this was built the exact same way. I gave it that little beat at the beginning, allowing the splines to grow, just animating that rest length within the soft body tag. And by having multiple attractors within that extruded shape, There's all those contact points that it's trying to wrap to, rather than it just being targeted to the center. And that's what really gives you that nice wrap. And in this case, I pushed the focal length of our camera even further. I ended up going to an 800mm focal length. And this really flattens out that logo, so you don't get any awkward depth perspective of our shape, so you can get that really clean silhouette. You can see I've probably got a few more splines animating in this one, which is creating that really nice wrap. So let's jump back into our little test project here, and we can do that really easily. And I'm going to grab all of our soft body tags and just clear the cache on them. Let's grab all of our string setups, duplicate them, and I'm just going to rotate these into a slightly different position, just so we don't get too much intersecting at the beginning, and we'll create a bigger fill for around our shape. So now you can see we've got plenty of dynamic strings in our scene. Hitting play again, and they're all going to be pulled towards those attractors that we've set. And now we're getting a much denser wrap around that shape. And this is looking really quite nice. And of course, we've still got those keyframes on our attractors. So at frame 150, they're all going to no longer want to be attracted to our shape. So we're just going to get this really beautiful growth out, almost hiding that shape. This was the basis of the idea, really taking advantage of that attractor, having a bit of a play with some forces. I know how it's got a little bit skewy there with breaking it through, but it's a really fun way to isolate the silhouette of your logo or whatever you're trying to create. Like I said, I hope that was a bit of fun, something you could take away from it, and I'm sure I'll see you again soon. Cheers, guys.